This is the third time I am refilming this video, and I'm about to yeet myself out of the window. Hi friends, hi, my name is Mia and this is my virtual vanity, a place where we both love makeup and we're quite critical of it. Today I want to talk about how American influencer culture affects international vanities and of course the vanities of Americans that are not influencers but are very into the current beauty space. I'd just like to extend a big thank you to my friend Melissa, who helped look over the script and point out some things from an American perspective. Her help was invaluable and this video wouldn't be here in this current form without her. Let's get started with my magnum opus of how American influencers influence everything. It's interesting to take a look at America's journey from the 20th century up until now. Decades passing, for many countries, America's idealized image crumbled and the American dream soured, which is a stark contrast from the way many countries used to look at America. For countries that were part of the former Soviet bloc or former communist bloc like mine, America was literally the land of milk and honey. America at the time was the center of the world. Nowadays, debatable. However, in the beauty sphere, America still is its center in more ways than one. I've nothing against America, and me pointing out its fall from grace just provides context. I'm not a geopolitical scientist. I'm not here to comment on what America is doing with other countries or in its own political climate. But if you're American, I don't have anything against you or your people. It's normal for your country to be the center of your world. It's just very curious to me how it's the center of everyone else's still. I often see political, justice, social discourse in non-American spaces get derailed with American arguments or topics that are more American-based and have no context whatsoever in that situation. Some non-Americans don't realize that America's situation is entirely unique and its own, and you can't just copy-paste arguments that you see between Americans online on different topics to our people and our situations. This also happens with discourse on beauty YouTube and how we view the current beauty standard in this space, how we view our vanities relating to each other here. Standards we base for how we interact with beauty when we are such huge content consumers are based on this space, which is very American-centric. Whether you're American or not, American influencers and their maximalist-inspired attitudes towards consumption and beauty affects you. It affects your vanity, it affects how you see your current makeup style, your current makeup routine. And sure, there are many people that are very individualistic and they go their own way no matter what they consume, but a lot of people like myself, you are influenced by the media you watch. American, non-American, we are all in this together. We all fall prey to this situation, and consumerism can lead all of us to a windy wallet and an overflowing vanity. It's just that it is more dangerous for non-Americans because of the disparity in income, and I'm going to touch on that a bit later. Many things that I will mention in this video can apply to you whether you're an American or not, because influencer culture seems to be a bubble within a bubble. Once you interact with the bubble, you touch it and you pop it, you end up being influenced otherwise than you would if you only interacted with regular makeup consumers from your country and if you would be exposed only to their beauty and vanity standards. Of course, I'm playing armchair psychologist here, so if your experience has been different, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I just love it when people share their experiences with me in the comments, so please do that. Talk a bit how American influencer consumerist culture affects how we consume makeup. And by we, I mean a certain type of consumer. We are not the average person. We are not the average makeup consumer. We equals people that are very active into the online beauty sphere on Instagram, YouTube, and to a certain extent, even beauty Twitter. Average consumers do not buy as much shit as we do. They don't see aspirational makeup as we do. And most often than not, do not have the same style of makeup and of purchasing that. They don't get exposed to YouTube and Instagram influencers as much. And when you do not get exposed to a behavior, you do not mimic it, you do not aspire to it, and you are not influenced by it. You cannot yearn for what you do not know it exists. Of course, they will be exposed to attitudes towards beauty standards and beauty styles from their own country, but I believe that those standards are more familiar with each other from country to country than any one of them is similar to the influencer beauty space standards and behaviors. Don't necessarily mean that these behaviors are malicious or bad or negative or whatever. They just are. And by existing, they, influence us. Let's talk about the rise of the influencer. Most big influencers are American. They have a much greater income than the average Joe, both American or not. They have a certain beauty style that is influenced by their lights, camera, and opulent behaviors. They have a revolving door of product that comes into their hands and just as quickly exits. And usually, of course, they make much more money than their watchers do. They consume makeup differently than their watchers do. Doesn't matter their location. A reason why American influencers are so prevalent is a bit of a chicken or egg situation. English speaking content has a much higher chance of reaching multiple people because English is the actual lingua franca of the world, the language that is seen as the international language. Moreover, the YouTube algorithm prefers English-speaking content over others. Not only that, but it does tend to promote you to your own demographic. One American state is the size of one European country. So of course that they will get exposed to a much bigger demographic than, say, a German YouTuber would speaking German. Influencers are aspirational and inspirational. Present a lifestyle of abundance, of options, a revolving door of products, the day-to-day satisfaction of our monkey brains, getting new things, a degree of a lifestyle that a lot of people want to achieve, aka working less for more money, doing something that you enjoy as your day job, getting praised all of the time, getting to try all of the new things all of the time. You start associating that type of behavior from a certain influencer with the idealized version of the lifestyle that you want to achieve. You see them parading all of these brands and you think of mimicking that behavior and trying all of these new products, because in a sense, by doing that type of behavior, you come one step closer to being similar to that ideal. With each new product, you come closer a bit to your fantasy self, the fantasy self that you created based on what you think that product will bring for you in terms of improvement. And this plays a lot into the idea of the fantasy self. The fantasy self is particularly insidious because it's the idea that you could be, that you would be, if only you had that certain product to facilitate it. That you could become this glamorous person if only you would buy that one red lipstick. Never mind that you never wear red lipstick. That you could become this athlete if you get the right type of running shoes. Or the yoga pants that you bought but never wore in the hopes that you would pick up yoga. Or the ColourPop Super Shock Shadows that you bought, paid customs for, paid international shipping for, just because you had the idea that it would be much better than anything that your current local market would offer. If it's not a fantasy self item, it's an item that has projected on it a certain type of perceived quality and desirability. I could get into details about how many non-Western people see Western makeup as better quality and how actually it's been proven that in Eastern European countries, Western companies sell shit product or shit at a lower quality to make better profit margins. For many Eastern European countries, American products are associated with the American dream, and Western products are associated with the freedom that the Western world had while we were under the wonderful boot of communism. Not only that, but a lot of product was smuggled in, so it was prized only for its rarity. If you wanted a pair of jeans, for example, you would have to go to the black market to get them. You could not get them in the stores here. We learned to appreciate American products and other foreign products because of their scarcity and rarity. And I think that is the case for many other non-American countries. Because you see all of this American media, these movies, these influencers, these magazines, all of these things that speak of certain products, and then there's this allure of them because you could not get them easily. And as we all know, things that can't be gotten easily are very prized indeed. So we circle back to the idea that just because they are American, those products are higher quality and are more desirable. And the more we see American influencers talk about them, the more we want them. Regardless if objectively that ColourPop liner might be the very same thing that that Golden Rose liner is. Or if that one Natasha Denona single shadow might be just as good as the Pupa Milano ones. The local items that you have may be very well good quality, but those other international American items may be more not from an objective reason, but because of a projected value that you assigned them. A lot of products have value associated to them just because of the origins or of the name. That's why people want Louis Vuitton bag, Gucci shoes, Louboutins, or whatever the hell you pronounce that. Fancy stuff that you want to get just because of the name, even though, let's say, a non-brand item would do just as well. People prefer items that have been spoken about and that already have a reputation. Those items already get a big plus because they get spoken about by these influencers. They like things that have brand names on them because that is a testament to quality. But it's a bit different if you're American, because for non-Americans, the Americanness of the product is in itself a testament to its make and its prestige. Whereas if you are American, that's your status quo, that's your baseline. For you, something that is more like, I don't know, key beauty or international type of makeup or Italian or whatever other makeup that you find exotic and fancy, maybe for you that is the equivalent of Americanness to us, simply because it's harder to get. Bigger topic and a bigger discussion to be had about how location changes attitudes and how some attitudes are downright xenophobic, like the fear of made in China, but that's like a whole separate video, really. I digress. If you're American, then there is that fantasy element of it. It's purely the idea of beauty and affluent makeup, not necessarily the location of the makeup that matters for you. So non-Americans desire American products, right? But there's a bit of an obstacle there, and let me play Captain Obvious for just a little bit. You live in America and you get an American salary in dollars. Salary that is proportional to the items that you need to buy. And American makeup prices are again proportional to what American consumers are willing to pay. From drugstore makeup that is very affordable for regular consumers to Natasha Denona, who appeals to a larger income bracket. But still, it would hurt the wallet, but it wouldn't be your whole monthly salary. Different countries have different salaries based on their currencies and on what the local products cost. A median salary in America may be a very rich salary in another country, and a very rich salary in another country may not be even a week's living wage in America. Need to pop off my phone for a second, but for example, $1 is 4.3 Romanian leu, 3.9 Polish zloty, 185.9 Sri Lankan rupees, 1.4 Libyan dinars, 17.2 Argentine pesos, to give just a few examples. So what those numbers tell me is that if you are American, you have a greater buying power than those other people have. You can buy more for one of your currency than we can for one of ours. And when American products get exported, specifically non-essential items, prices stay the same. But your salary also stays the same. And if your local currency is 4 times weaker than the dollar, then you have to pay the price of that makeup, or 4 equals the price in your local. Depending on the retailer, they also add profit margins, they also add shipping costs. If you buy directly from the American retailer, you pay international shipping, you pay customs duty. So not only does the price stay the same even though you have a much weaker salary or a much weaker buying power, you also have to pay extra fees and charges, which makes the product much pricier. It's quite hard to come to terms with that if you don't often remind yourself that, because you see these American influencers buy very often a lot of stuff and you think that you can't keep up with them, and you realize that you can't, and you start to feel a bit inadequate, even though you know objectively it's none of your fault. The current rate of product that they go through is much bigger for the average consumer, even on an American salary. So you somehow feel lesser than, and it's too expensive for the non-American consumer as well, because you physically, monetarily can't possibly keep up. Sometimes even if you're in the top tier of salaries in your country. Always this feeling of inadequacy and peer pressure and trying to keep up and try to use what everyone else is using because they're your friends or you admire them. And I'm counting myself in it. Like, I'm not immune from it. I sometimes get sad because I can't try all of the wonderful indie makeup that my other friends are using, and I sometimes get sad that I have to budget much more harshly for my makeup purchases than someone with an American salary would. It happens, we're humans, we tend to compare ourselves with each other. It's natural, but it is exacerbated by the current American influencer consumerist climate. I think it's fascinating and valuable to discuss what got us here, what made us think that our fantasy self has to match those American influencer ideals. Why don't we go more towards local products and supporting local brands? Why do we think that the American variants are shinier? Is it only our favorite influencers talking about them? Is it us fetishizing something that comes from the Western world and from America in particular? In a sense, I think that it's something so universal, but it manifests in different ways. So for example, if you're an American consumer that only used drugstore until you got into makeup YouTube, and then you see everyone using all of these fancier Sephora brands, you start wanting to use the Sephora brands, right? I've talked with a lot of people and they told me that was their experience, that they didn't think that was desirable until the influencer made it desirable for them. And for non-Americans, you have perfectly workable local variant for your needs, but then you start wanting American drugstore and American Sephora brands, and you start moaning that you don't have an Ulta, and you want indie brands that you can get, and so on and so forth. It's just that by being foreign to you, those products get exalted and exoticized, and you want them. American, you may project all of your misconceptions, all of your preconceptions on that American stuff, that it's better quality because it's American, that it's better because it comes from the free world or whatever. And you start wanting those things even though, you know, you could get the same thing from like Golden Rose or Flor Mar, or Kiosk or whatever, but the price is much higher, and that's the problem. And you're paying extra money to keep up with the American Joneses because it's much more fun to use, I don't know, the same ColourPop palette that everyone else is using rather than your obscure Golden Rose quad or whatever. There is joy in a sense of shared ownership of things. There is joy in seeing people using the same things that you are using. And the problem is that because we see so much content from overseas, it's much harder to get that joy because you've got all of these obstacles in front of it. And it affects how you consume. You want things that you see other people online using, not what your mom is using or not what your friends are using, what those glamorous people online are using. That is, I think, the biggest way that American influence culture influences us non-Americans. It pushes us to export our beauty consumption instead of supporting local brands. At best, you do end up supporting local retailers that import American makeup. But if we go so much towards the American makeup, then how are we pushing innovation and branding in our own country? Why would indie brands pop up here if we don't even look at them? If we keep looking towards the American ones that we can't even get. Moreover, local brands are not that spoken of. The American ones are, so you are more likely to find a recommendation for something American than you would be to find something local. So there's just bias over bias over bias. There's also the fact that statistically Americans have a much more maximalist lifestyle than other countries. The University of California Television, so UCTV, I'll actually link that documentary down below as well as other sources that inspired this video. They did a count and they did a documentary on how many things average American households have. Everything there is bigger, like the houses, the pantries, the fridge, the wardrobe, everything was so much bigger. And I really blame these influencers for being so maximalist when that is the lifestyle there. I'm not here to judge or explain how and why. I'm really not that smart yet. I'll try and figure that out. I'll try and do more research. But it just seems to be the case there. That translates into American influencers' collections, the obsession for options, dupes, backups, the curiosity of trying more, wearing more. It's translating to everyone else as well internationally because in a sense, YouTube and Instagram are our virtual homes. American influencers are dictating the baseline for how our homes and how we behave in our homes. And America keeps being the baseline because America has been at the forefront for beauty innovation and patents, as I mentioned before. There are so many American brands that are currently popular, and of course they keep pushing their product to American influencers. There's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. What came first? The American influencer that created the algorithm because YouTube saw that that was what worked, or the algorithm pushing the American influencer and thus brands keep sending them product that will help them do better on the algorithm? Who sends more PR to American influencers than American brands? Which leads to these American brands have much more visibility than any other type of international brand could ever have. Many of them are getting products for free or they're paid to have those products shown. They have access to them, make them more desirable, and export their opinions internationally with each video. In a sense, international brands may be sabotaging themselves by not sending PR to American influencers, which is, again, it's such a vicious circle. It's such a vicious circle because they make visible their own brands, of course, and American brands know how to play into it, and we keep wanting more and more of it. Because Because of the internet and local importers, we now see these American brands and we desire them. And we get frustrated when our local retailers don't bring them in or bring only the basics and not the latest collections. And we feel slighted in a way. It's like, oh, what? Your American products aren't good enough for us? They aren't good enough for our market? Why? You know, the brands are starting to catch up. They're starting to realize that international markets are quite profitable, and they're starting to enter these markets in force because they realize that we will pay exorbitant marked up prices for exotic American makeup to keep up with the American Joneses. I did mention that there is a psychological factor to it, at least for Eastern Europe, where American products were heralded as the mark of the land of the free. And even though it's been 40 years since the fall of 30 years since the fall of communism, we still associate international products to be much better than our current one. We associate using those products as being part of a modern country, an international country, and us being modern international consumers. Another topic for another ass video. Another thing is that American influencers are normalizing big collections, and while it may be affordable for them for various reasons, either because they receive product and PR for free or if they have the money to purchase everything, that does not apply to everyone. It's not realistic for normal consumers who do not get product for free and do not get the money from sponsorships and do not get the money from AdSense, even though it might be relatively easier for makeup watchers to keep up with their American influencers rather than the international watchers because of the whole, you know, customs international shipping income difference that I mentioned earlier. Is that the fetishization of variety, big collections, dupes, hunting for the newest thing, holy grail, is hurting us all. It's just hurting international consumers more because we pay so much more for each item. So exposed to these influencers, to their videos, to how they live, that you kind of forget that that's not how real life works, and you visit your friend or you visit your mom and you end up taking a peek in their makeup bag and you realize that you could have lived out of a makeup bag years ago, but now you can't anymore. You realize that they are the normal, they are the baseline, and you are a bit of an anomaly. For them, there is never the rush of the newer, shinier thing that is so prevalent in our beauty culture nowadays. And of course, the rush for the newer, shinier thing, it comes from the influencers. There's always this steady stream of acquire, praise, talk about, do a quick look with it, then immediately forget about it. Pick the next item, rinse and repeat. Unsustainable for the regular consumer, both American and international. You know, maybe in the end it's truly a universal experience. Influencers will influence. The fact that they are American influencers with American values and a certain set of American influenced aesthetics maybe only takes second seat to the fact that a lot of the influencer culture is influenced by profits and profit making. Maybe if they were other types of influencers from another country, let's say that we lived in Man in the High Castle and Japan would have been the top tier country and we would all have spoken Japanese and there were Japanese influencers, maybe we would feel the same way about Japanese products. We would say that, you know, because it's Japanese, it's better. Just like we say, oh, because it's American, it's better. I do feel though that in the current status quo, by consuming American media, we are internalizing their habits, we are internalizing their culture, we are sometimes internalizing, you know, as I said, arguments that do not apply to our lives. We get used to trying to achieve that way of life that for so many of us would be impossible or too expensive, becomes our new normal. And I also feel that we are so quick to go with the wave. As soon as American influencers started curating their collections, we started decluttering too, things that we saved up for. just because minimalism and streamlined collections were the next best thing. And I worry that it will end up being cyclical and everyone will suffer for it in one way or another. You know, maybe this is the new normal. Maybe it's not that or good. What is normal anyway? I'm done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do not forget to let me know your opinions down in the comments. If you thought I was talking shit, tell me that too. If you think I'm wrong, I would love to hear about how I'm wrong, and I would love to be educated. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, morning, second breakfast, third lunch, whatever it is you're from. Bye.